Hi, my name is Maria Powell, and today we're going to be diving into the concept of evil in comparison to God being the source of all goodness. And so this is for the response for week 5, group 3 discussion question being, in what sense is God the source of ultimate goodness and all goodness, also the cause of evil? And my answer comes from the discussion between Taylor McManus and myself. And I just want to, for a quick second, point out how excited I am that we're addressing this question, mostly because an understanding of this question is so desperately needed in our world right now, because there's so many people that are so lost in this concept, so confused, and always asking, how can bad things happen to good people, people that are striving to be holy, people that are striving to be the best person that they can be? And if there is an ultimate God that loves us and desires us to be with him, how can he endure and watch and let happen so many bad things to so many people who love him? And this is huge right now. Like, this is a big concept in our growing secular world that needs to be addressed. And as solid Catholics going forth to serve this purpose, we want to be able to give them the best answer that we can get. And therefore, grounding our answer in the greatest theologian of all time, being St. Thomas Aquinas, like, we have everything that we need because he knows the truth, and we want to be able to give the people that are hungering for this answer the truth that they need. And so, hereforth, we need to, going forward, base our understanding and explanation of this question, how can God, the source of all good, be the cause of evil, in the truth that we know how evil actually works and is. And that comes from knowing that evil is caused only by the deficit of a good, a deprivation of the good. And therefore, Aquinas over and over stresses how evil in itself cannot be a being. It in no way can exist as its own substance or entity. Like, it is rather strictly and in only one way a privation or absence of the good, which he hones right in on in question 49, article 1. And this is the truth that being that all things find their origin in God. Across the board, everything has their origin in God, and that God, in his permissive will, allows for privations of good to be possible. Therefore, in the following sense, he allows for evil to be. And we'll dive into the distinction between his permissive will versus his direct will in going forward here. But we just have to understand that God does allow and cause evil, relies on the understanding that nothing is essentially evil. There's no bad God being that's fighting our good God being. Like, that's a different understanding in different religions, not Catholicism. So, we must understand that evil is an accidental property of an essentially good thing, and that God, being the source of all given good in the entity, it follows that God, in a sense, is the source and cause of what is essentially good, yet accidentally evil. To break this down a little more, by knowing that evil is essentially a privation of the good, and it is in no way an entity reality of itself, that is so important to grasp and understand, we can proceed to uncover its efficient cause. And Aquinas dives into the 4 causes of evil and its relation to God, and the efficient one is the most important. As God being the efficient cause of all things, we must first note that there can in no way be a privation or lack of something in God. Like, God is all perfect, he is supreme, he is the perfection of all things, and so he can hold no defect in himself and is eternally all perfect and good, and therefore cannot be the author or creator of evil, because if he is supreme and perfect goodness, there cannot be a privation in that goodness that allows for evil to be in him. And so therefore evil can't come from him in no way. That would be heresy. So being the creator of all being, he instructs he holds no defect and is eternally perfect, and therefore cannot be the author. And so God is the creator and author of all being us. He instructs and implements within each being an impulse towards the goodness. And we understand this from Genesis, which says that we were made in his image and likeness, therefore we're made in the image and likeness of goodness, and our interior inherent design is to be ordered towards striving towards greater goodness. But because of the fall, unfortunately, we lack in that perfection of goodness that he desires us to achieve. And God has created man from the beginning with free will and reason, which allows him to make decisions and allows for there to be a discrepancy between man's will and God's will, which allows for the defect of sin. McDermott points this out in page 92, where he says that reasoning creatures with wills and reason given by God endure a loss of form or wholeness that is unwillingly undergone whilst willingly not acting as one should can be characterized as a fault. And the fault is tied to sin. And this this becomes an impediment between the God-given impulse that is inherent within us towards goodness and its recipient, which fogs the will of the person and its connection to the will of God, which leads to our corruption in our will, in man, making a space that is missing perfect goodness, which allows for space for evil to be present. And God must allow this. He never directly wills this to take place in man, because it's man's own doing, allowing and accepting the privation within himself, God must allow for this absence of complete goodness. Following from that, God, having a universal viewpoint of all things that happen within his creation, he is forever scoping out the ultimate common good of every being. He understands that there are some situations where there's a good intent and a good goal, but not completely good circumstances. An example of this that is pointed out is that the food chain that occurs naturally in nature, the death of one animal for the survival and the benefit of the other, is the way that God naturally ordered the world, and this is good. This is goodness in itself. Well, not in itself, but this is how he has created the order of creation, and therefore God is always directly willing good, but permits evil to occur on account of the greater common good in the universe. McDermott explains this very well when he writes, "If God did not permit bad, many goods would naturally disappear. Fire cannot exist without consuming air, nor lions survive without killing antelope. Nor could we praise the righting of wrongs or the endurance of suffering if wickedness did not exist." Therefore, another key part that we have to understand in this whole dynamic between God allowing the evil on account of the greater good is in reference and connection to his ultimate justice. The part of the nature of God is his justice, and flowing from his justice is this necessity for punishment and suffering, which in a sense is tied to evil. But that evil does not exist in God. It is just an occurrence that flows from him implementing his supreme justice that needs to take place in the world. Therefore, on account of his justice, God permits and is connected with evil by way of two modes: his direct will and his permissive will. And this is what we're going to unpack, because this is really important. His permissive will follows the process outlined above, where God does allow humans to impede the motions he gives them and the impulses he gives them towards the goodness, which results in a fault and is allowing for evil actions to take place. But this is caused in no way by God's direct will. He only permits this to happen by his permissive will. So therefore, there's a distinction between his direct will and his permissive will. His direct will flows the process of justice, where he is directly involved in the punishment in order to establish justice, which is necessarily attached and is necessarily attached to the rectification of the will of the sinner, which results in suffering and evil. Such suffering is indirectly willed by God, but is permitted. Yet God, being the source of all good and is all-powerful, does have ultimate control over evil and its effects in man, and therefore has and does put a limit on it for man, and does keep it in check in order that we may not ever become completely consumed by it, and we forever continue to see the light of striving towards that ultimate goodness which he has made us to be geared towards. And so therefore, in that whole comprehensive understanding, we come to understand that God is not the source of evil, but he does cause and allow evil to exist in the world in order that we can understand this concept of how he's using it to bring us closer to himself and more ultimately unite our interior impulse towards his perfect goodness and striving to be like him and to be saints, that we can then fight evil and allow for that perfect goodness to overcome any privations in our soul on account of sin or yeah. So I hope that was clear and understandable for you, so that you can now go and be God's disciple out in the world and help our brothers and sisters who don't understand this concept. We want them to understand how our all-loving Father allows for evil to exist in the world, but does not directly will it, because he loves us so very much. God bless you.